Destroying Media Narratives. I'm George Samueli. It is now 9:08 p.m. in Central Europe. And you know what I'm going to say next? That summer is now a distant memory. Pitch black. It's been pitch black outside now for a few hours. And we're really now heading towards the true doldrums of fall and winter. And, you know, these sunny days will very shortly be a very distant memory. Now, on this cheery note, welcome everybody who has joined me. I really appreciate it. Obviously there's a great deal to talk. So Essie Delendum says it's noon in California and sunny. You know, congratulations. I mean, this is what, you know, when I lived in California, I lived in Northern California, and this is what I really liked about it, is that it's very mild, and you do get an awful lot of sun. I mean, it's not that is an amazingly beautiful weather that you enjoy there. So, you know, you get even, you know, Californians complain, you know, in January, oh, it's so cold. And you think, well, what the hell is this? This is like a mild spring day, but Californians complain. But it's very, very sunny, and really, that's the part that I really enjoyed in California. Let me first of all make a couple of comments about the Trump Musk showdown. The 2-hour-long conversation that took place last night. I have to admit, I didn't really stay for all 2 hours. I mean, that was a little grueling, but I did find the media coverage hilarious. So the way the media now playing is like they all get their orders from on high, and you know, a command comes down, and they're all obliged to use the same language, and the word that they all have to use at all times is rambling. Trump is always rambling. He rambles. So he was rambling in his 2-hour conversation with Musk, just like he always rambles at his rallies. He rambles in his interviews, and you know, rambles in any conversations he takes part in. Now, that would suggest that somehow the opposition, that, let's say, when you get Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden and now Kamala Harris, are very succinct and to the point. This word rambling is never used about them. So it would suggest that somehow Trump is, you know, that it's a unique characteristic about him. But the interesting thing is that that word rambling is often used about others that the media do not like. So rambling is often used against Viktor Orban. He apparently also rambles. Putin rambles. I don't know. I mean, if they actually ever covered Kim Jong-un, I mean, he also, I'm sure, would ramble. But the great thing is that the moment you read this ramble, you can say, well, so he obviously was just talking a lot of rubbish. I mean, nothing that he said was worth anything. It was just, rambling. And that's obviously the goal of the media coverage. So you're convinced that, well, he said nothing of any note because he was just rambling. And they never really explain, well, what is rambling? What does that even mean? I mean, he covers a number of topics. Well, yeah, that's what you do when you're at a news conference. So he holds a news conference, and it was a rambling news conference. I thought that's what they said the other day. It was rambling. Oh, and every media outlet said the same thing. Oh, rambling. It was rambling. And you think, yeah, but because at a news conference, he's asked a number of different questions, and so he goes from topic to topic. And so this is so. But what's interesting is the way the journalists, they're in a kind of, I know there was the familiar term hive, but it's more the way a flock of birds flies. I mean, that it's like they get an instruction and they all follow that same instruction, and it's quite an impressive feat. I mean, when you see a flock of birds fly, it is quite extraordinary, because they're all getting the same message, and they have to maintain their position. They don't bump into one another, and they all move in synchronicity. And it's very impressive to see. So journalists are like that. So they've all been told, you are to use the word rambling whenever you're referring to Donald Trump. I will do so. But you don't even have to say it, explicitly. They will immediately already adopt that. So anyway, they said this word rambling. And then they kept talking about how he had a lisp, and the suggestion that he was drunk. This, of course, is really very stupid, because Trump is a well-known teetotaler. He never touches the stuff, so he's never drinks. So therefore, it's all kind of stupid to suggest that he was drinking. And but that's always interesting, is that the things that are said about Trump are obviously things that are untrue. They have to be untrue because of everything else we know about Trump. So let's take the claim that he must have had sex with that porn star Stormy Daniels. Of course, because we know Trump is a low-life scumbag, and as a low-life scumbag, he's, of course, the kind of person who has such low-life scumbag taste that he would have sex with a porn star. Of course he was. I mean, everyone assumed it. Of course it was, even though Trump denied it, and even though no one was ever able to present any evidence that he had sex with a porn star. But because Trump was obviously so disgusting, that's the kind of thing he would do. So it was believed by conservatives, but believed by all those prissy little priggish, nauseating, creepy little children at National Review magazine, who of course all believed that Trump had sex with Stormy Daniels, and obviously Stormy Daniels was telling the truth. Now again, if you know anything about Trump, you know that Marty says picture of us online. Yes, exactly. A picture of the birds in unison. Always very impressive. I mean, how they do it. It's quite amazing. How they can fly like that and not get in each other's way. It's an amazing feat. So anyway, if we know anything about Trump, we know that he's a germaphobe. That's what we know. He's a germaphobe, and so he wouldn't touch a porn star with a barge pole. I mean, he wouldn't touch a hooker with a barge pole. And I mean, and everybody knows this, that he's a germaphobe. You think he's never going to touch somebody like Kamala Harris? I mean, no, well, that was a Freudian slip. I meant Stormy Daniels, and the same goes for these kind of these stories. The famous story about when he was in that hotel room in Russia, which supposedly started the whole Russiagate nonsense. That the Russians had something on him, that the compromat, because he was stayed in this hotel, and then he had these Russian hookers urinate on him. And apparently it was in this videotape. Of course, nobody ever saw this tape, but this was the substance of the Steele dossier, And then, of course, that loathsome creep, the FBI director James Comey said when he was interviewed, I think by Stephanopoulos, said, "Well, do you think that this tape exists?" And he said, "Well, I don't know." In other words, he thinks there's a good chance that it exists. So, so as he says, George is giving Trump's alibi for golden showers. But the point is that Trump is not the type of person who would do that. Again, because he is a germaphobe. I don't think he'd be hanging out with hookers. I don't think if you're a germaphobe, you don't hang out with hookers. And again, you're not going to just have hookers, urinate on you if you're a germaphobe. I mean, this is something everybody knows about him. But nonetheless, all the media then pretend to take all this seriously and pretend to believe, well, who knows? Maybe it's true. I don't know. Maybe. And of course, it was nonsense. So anyway, so in this Twitter space, when he was conversing, and it obviously had something to do with the way this Twitter spaces work, that people sound as if they lisp. But media all again the flock of geese, they all pick up on this rambling, lisping, and of course this went hand in hand with this adulation for Kamala. So Kamala, who now I think it's 3 weeks, I think it's 22 days, 23 days since she was anointed the Democratic Party nominee. She still hasn't given an interview to anyone. Now, if you're a journalist, you would think that you might think, hey, I don't think it's right that we have somebody who's aspiring to be president of the United States, and there's only less than 3 months to go, almost now 2.5 months to go, till the election, and she hasn't given any interviews. She hasn't even sat down with a friendly reporter. She hasn't even sat down with George Stephanopoulos. But instead, the media, while bashing Trump for rambling, don't think it at all strange that a presidential nominee isn't even sitting down for a friendly interview. Instead, they continue to write about how fantastically well she's doing, how she's surging. There's a wave of amazing enthusiasm. Democratic Party activists are incredibly excited. And when the question comes up, well, don't you think that she should sit down for an interview? I mean, let alone a news conference, don't you think she should sit down for an interview? No, because what she's doing now is working. So apparently this is the function of journalists, to tell us what's working and what isn't working. So the fact that she can basically bask in this adulatory media coverage without having to sit down and get asked about policy questions, without even any kind of statements about her on policy. Well, it's working. Hey, well, if it's working, it's working. Well, if you're a Democratic Party activist, then I think that's fine. I mean, if that's you're happy with that, then you can say, yeah, well, if it's working, it's good. But if you're a journalist, if you purport to be a journalist, then your task should be, well, I think she should be asked questions about policy. What does she really think about Gaza? What does she think about this Ukrainian offensive in Russia? Is she for it? Does she think this is a good idea? But no, it's working. Well, it's working. So essentially, you have media that are really in the tank for the Democratic Party. In fact, they're Democratic Party activists. And I know that's an obvious, well, that's a cliche, and then it may well be. But if you're presenting in-kind contributions to the Democratic Party, which is what the media are doing, it's in-kind contribution. They're essentially doing public relations. I mean, if you just look at that cover on Time magazine of Kamala as this great beauty, something like Kamala's moment or whatever. So you're making in-kind contribution, then I think electoral laws should apply to you. And that's anybody who's making any kind of contribution, whether it's a monetary contribution or an in-kind contribution, you have to be subjected to federal election law. And I think it's high time that the media were subjected to a federal election law, and that there have to be an evaluation of just how much they're contributing to the Democratic Party, to a presidential campaign, and therefore, they could be penalized if it exceeds a set amount, because it's clear that that these are in-kind contributions and that they have monetary value. So if they have monetary value, so you have to estimate what is the monetary value of these in-kind contributions. And I think like Time magazine puts that cover there completely inappropriate, because Harris was, up until the day before yesterday, regarded as a joke. That her you remember the argument had been that we can't push Biden aside, because if we push Biden aside, then we get Harris. And Harris is terrible. Nobody likes her. Everybody, she's awful. She's a lousy candidate, a lousy public speaker, a lousy interviewee. She's terrible. We can't push, we have to stick with Biden because Harris is just so terrible. That was the conventional wisdom up until 2 weeks ago. Nothing that has happened since then should shake us off that belief, because she's been closeted. She hasn't done any campaign appearances other than these very staged do's in front of adoring crowds, but she hasn't sat down for an interview, because we know that the interviews she has done in the past have all been disastrous, and those were interviews with friendly reporters. So it's not like she's ever sat down with any unfriendly reporter. She's done these with, what's the name of that guy? I mean, they're all fairly ubiquitous. I mean, I was thinking of Stephanopoulos, but I'm kind of trying to remember the guy at NBC with the stentorian voice. But anyway, she sat down with him. It didn't go well. She sat down with other again friendly reporters, and who asked her about, well, you didn't go to you haven't been to the border. You're supposed to be the border czar, but you haven't been to the border. And then she snapped back, well, I haven't been to Europe either. Those were not good appearances. And so that's what she was thought to be, a terrible a candidate. And now, boom, we've got this advertising campaign, and which is supposed to tell us that she is, wow, really exciting, and whoa, fantastic, and there's enthusiasm. So where was this excitement and enthusiasm 3 weeks ago? It didn't exist. This is all invented. It was completely invented. It's just it's a I think somebody posted a kind of a short film that was made about this advertising guru, David Ogilvy, on the Locals board. It's well worth watching, because David Ogilvy, he was this genius at advertising, and he kind of, I guess, reinvented advertising in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. Ogilvy and Mather, and it's a masterful. You just simply create something out of nothing. You've persuaded the public that this is a very exciting person. Hey, but I thought that she was a complete idiot and totally useless. Oh no, she's exciting. Everyone is, well, getting, they can't get over what a thrilling new candidate the Democrats have. And so that it's this amazing con job. So the question we have to ask, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer to that question. Can she sustain this? I mean, we're 2.5 months, so she's got the Democratic convention coming up. Obviously, it's just going to be a coronation. Again, enthusiasm, blah blah. Media will be just ecstatic. That takes us through to September, and then there's only 2 months left to the election. Can she ride out for 2 months without doing too many interviews? She'll probably have to do 1 or 2. She'll do, I think, this one debate with Trump. I think she's going to do that. There won't be any more debates. There'll just be this one debate with Trump. And then maybe she can do 2 interviews and see whether that's enough to get her over the finish line in November. I don't know whether that's enough. I mean, it's a very interesting question whether the media will decide that they don't really want to talk to her. They don't want to interview her. They don't want to put her into any position where her vulnerabilities will be shown up, and then they can just say, hey, well, the most important thing is just to beat Trump. Don't have to do anything else. Just beat Trump. And then you have an election, and then we know what you do in an election. You steal an election. I mean, it's a tried and true, and we'll do another. There'll be another 2020. We're going to be counting and counting and counting and counting and counting day after day after day after election until we get enough votes to get Kamala into the Oval Office. Maybe. I mean, it worked for Biden in 2020. Just keep him locked up in the basement. Don't do any interviews. And when he does do the odd rally, it's a bit embarrassing. No one shows up. And then when you get the election, then hey, the votes start coming in, and boy, he got 81 million votes. 81 million votes, 16 million more votes than Barack Obama did. So she may well just get away with it. It's I mean, I think we really are reaching the point of democracy being completely meaningless. I mean, it's like you having candidates that in no way represent what the public wants. I mean, let's just imagine, here's like Starmer. I'm looking at Starmer. I think Marty, our good friend Marty, has posted a picture of Starmer. Wow. But so I'm thinking of Starmer now. He gets, fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn did in 2019. His majority in his own constituency is slashed from 28,000 in 2019 to 8,000. He in no way promises voters anything that they really want. I mean, we know that the British people have been very upset about immigration for decades now. This is an ongoing thing, decade after decade. We know the role that immigration played in Brexit. We know the role immigration played when Boris Johnson won his landslide victory in 2019. and no one does anything about it. And now you've got Starmer. Starmer pretty much made it explicit he wasn't going to do anything about it. He was just going to facilitate immigrants coming in to the border. And Starmer pretty much has said, we're not going to do anything. We get, people are still going to be arriving on their boats, demanding asylum. He's not going to do anything. And he's just going to use the police powers of the state to crack down on those who are unhappy. And then you think, well, where does this go? Where and the same thing goes for Harris. I mean, if Harris wins an election, then you think, well, what was it that people wanted from Harris? I mean, did she want did people want more multiculturalism? Did they want more diversity, equity, and inclusiveness? Do they want more immigration? Do they want more stupid wars? Do they want more Ukraine wars, more wars in the Middle East? Do they want their government risking world war with Russia, with Iran, whatever? Is that why she won? So we could well have Harris and said, well, what was it? What did Harris offer that people wanted? And of course, she didn't offer anything that people wanted. So we reached the point of democracy that is completely meaningless. You get one Tweedledee to be replaced by Tweedledum, neither of whom have the slightest interest to give people anything that they desire. Now we can have a go and attack Trump, and that's fine. That's very easy. We can all bash Trump. We can all see all the weaknesses and so on. Fine. I mean, I've done that. It's just easy. But at least Trump offers something a little different. He does offer an alternative. I mean, there's still the memory of Trump in 2016 when he was offering something different. Harris isn't. Harris is telling us everything that you've been had to endure for the past few decades, you're going to have to endure some more. The same with Starmer. And Harris will, of course, introduce a police state to the best that she can do, the way Starmer is introducing a police state. Remember, it was Harris who made it part of her platform. Well, not her platform, but her campaign for the Democratic Party nomination in 2020 to kick Trump off Twitter. She said this in 2019. I mean, because it was 2019, she said Trump should be kicked off Twitter. That's who Harris is. Harris is in the business of suppressing dissent. And then then she will do that. Much as Starmer. Now, of course, in the United States, unlike the United Kingdom, it's a little more difficult because the courts have a certain independence. There's the First Amendment, and so it's not that easy. But it isn't. But the groundwork has been laid because remember, the Supreme Court ruled that the government can coerce the social media companies. I mean, that was a big deal. And then Amy Coney Barrett wrote that opinion for the Supreme Court, saying, you can coerce the social media companies, and that's what she's going to try and do. Now, Starmer is an interesting case because he is pushing ahead with his crackdowns on social media, and what's so striking, and it's so pervasive that you don't even notice it, that the courts in the UK are now administering very, very swift justice at the behest of Starmer. So people are just going in, they're getting arrested, they're going straight to a court, before a judge, and within a couple of hours they're already sent to prison. Now, why is this happening? Well, because the government said you've got to administer swift justice. And then you think, hey, hang on, aren't we supposed to be living in a free society? Aren't we supposed to be living in a society which respects the rule of law? Aren't we supposed to be living in a society in which the courts are independent of the executive? The judiciary is independent of the executive. We have an independent judiciary. Just because the government tells us to mete out swift justice, we have our independent standing. Well, no. The answer is that they're very happy to do exactly as the government bids, as long as their victims, the court's victims, the ones who are being they're going straight to prison for social media posts, or for standing around and observing a riot, not even taking part in the riot themselves, but observing a riot. They're going straight to prison at the behest of Starmer. Now, because they're white and they're native Britons, they can expect very swift justice. Now, if it were the other way around, if it were Black Lives Matter, if it were, we have Hindus and Muslims. Remember, we had Hindus and Muslims fighting it out in 2022 in Leicester. Hindu and Muslim riots in Leicester. It's all forgotten now. It's forgotten now because the government didn't do anything about it. Apparently, it's perfectly acceptable to have Hindus and Muslims rioting in the United Kingdom because then I can't help reading this. Marty says Buddy's threatening to replace George with Douglas Murray. Now you're giving him ideas, because Buddy's going to read this and say, "Ooh, now that's a good idea. Let's bring Douglas Murray. I really like Douglas Murray. He's much better than George. Maybe he could raise some money, bring some money in for once." Marty, you're giving that wretched, creature all sorts of ideas, so but when it comes to like Hindu and Muslim riots in Leicester, or even in the case of this in Leeds with the Romani, there's something. Hey, there's nothing we can do about this. This is all up to community leaders. We have community leaders. The community leaders need to bring order to the community. The police can't do anything. The courts can't do anything. We can't do anything. Sorry, we just don't. It's out of our hands. It's up to the community leaders. So they go to the community leaders and ask the community leaders to bring order to your community. See, they have a community. These disgusting, toothless, savage white Brits, they don't have a community. They don't get a community. They just got to knock on the door and they go straight to prison. So this swift justice that the courts, the independent judiciary, metes out at the behest of the Starmer regime, they mete it out to the undesirables of the public. The people who deserve to get whacked over the head and then get whacked over the head again and again. Now, the next time, let's imagine there's a next time when there's a riot somewhere, with people of color, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs. Britain has just become a complete, this colorful tapestry of just about every kind of person in the world. I don't think there's going to be a swift justice. I think that Starmer, Obergruppenführer Starmer, will be calling for community leaders to bring calm to their communities. We need calm from their communities. And the police, they know this. They get their cues from the government. They know, hey, when can we use brutal force? And when are we supposed to just withdraw and let the community sort it out so that they'd be free to burn trucks, free to throw rocks at the police, burn down buildings, and the police just simply withdraw and leave it to community leaders to restore order. So they know this. This is what the police know. They know, hey, when can I club somebody over the head? Oh, well, if it's this horrible Briton white guy, yeah, we can club him over the head. That's no problem there. But if it's a Sikh, no, we can't. Dave Jenkins says, "Are you kidding? Douglas is off the charts Zionist. Peter would go apoplectic if he was on the show." I think Marty knows that. I think Marty was being facetious, and I assume Marty was being facetious, and bringing up Douglas Murray, and I think. But Buddy, I think, is more sadistic. I think he would be, I think his view would be that, yeah, I mean, he's so useless. I mean, let's have Douglas Murray instead. I mean, why not? Anything's better than him. So anyway, let's take a look at some of the comments on among our locals supporters. And I go all the way back. Here's Danoki. Thank you, Danoki. It says, Kedvesh George, now that basketball and track and field are over, what will it take for people to finally wake up from their opium-induced stupor of listening to Scott Ritter, Martyanov, Escobar, Hinkle for 2.5 years, how Russia is totally annihilating Ukraine and NATO stand at all? I bet even if they take over Kremlin, Z and others will claim that it is their final trap. That will be their utter downfall. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I was looking today at Moon of Alabama. I thought, well, what's Moon of Alabama? Moon of Alabama has been kind of a little bit quiet for a couple of days, but today he declared that it's over. It's already stopped. It's been stopped. The Ukrainian incursion into Kursk has been stopped. He doesn't know this. He has absolutely no idea that it's been stopped. His sources of information are, as always, the Russian Ministry of Defense. Well, it's very strange because the Russian Ministry of Defense has told us, different things. I mean, they first of all said, well, only 1,000 Ukrainians were involved in this operation in Kursk, but then they're telling us that something like 1,800 Ukrainians have been killed. So it's a little bit hazy. I mean, if they're claiming something like 1,800 have been killed, well, how many Ukrainians then were involved in this operation? You can't very well kill more people than involved in the operation. If you've evacuated 200,000 from the Kursk oblast, that's quite a number. That sounds like a fairly serious military operation. So now the gentleman that you have referred to, they're doing this routine of the this is the Ardennes offensive. This is the Battle of the Bulge. So in other words, defeat is already inevitable, but they made one last grand gesture. The problem with that theory, it's a very nice theory, is that we've been hearing about this last gasp, last throw of the dice that Ukraine is engaged in, and that it's all over. There's a problem with that. In the first place, the arms are now flowing into Ukraine at a nice clip. So that whole issue of all the Republicans are holding up arms and so on, I mean, that's gone. I mean, the arms are going in. Money is flowing into Ukraine. And now they lowered the age of mobilization to 25, so they're getting some new manpower. Now you can say, oh but they're much smaller than Russia. They don't have anything like the manpower that Russia has, which is of course true. But the point is that wars are won by force. You have to go in and win a force. They're not won by what you've got on paper. How many in theory, how many men can Russia call up? How many men can Ukraine call up? And that's really the problem, that this commentary by Ritter and the rest of them, it's all based on this theory. But if you look at the number of men who are deployed in Ukraine, Ukrainians and Russians, it's pretty comparable. I mean, I think it's something like 800,000 on both sides. So at no point has Russia got that kind of overwhelming manpower that could bring this war to a decisive conclusion. If you come in and boom, now you've got 3, 4, 5 times the manpower that Ukraine has, then that could be decisive. But Russia isn't putting that into the field, and Russia is refusing. They said today, we're not going to mobilize. Well, okay, then they can go on with this grinding war in Ukraine, taking one village at a time. That could go on for a long time. But that's just Donetsk. We're not even talking about Kherson and Zaporozhye. And incidentally, not all of Lugansk is still is under Russian control. Much of it is, but not all of it. So then the question then is, well, what is Ukraine trying to achieve in its Kursk offensive? Well, so far, contrary to Moon of Alabama, it's been halted. They haven't been pushed out. They haven't been thrown out. I would think that in order to get them out, Russia is going to have to bring in some serious force, which means that they are going to have to pull their forces out from Donetsk, which I assume was part of the objectives as to what Ukraine was trying to do, that is going to force the Russians to withdraw some of their forces from Donetsk and take them to Kursk in order to push out the Ukrainians. In which case, again, progress in Donetsk is going to be quite slow. It's going to be even slower than it is now. Or there could be some kind of a trading land or whatever. So at the moment, it's very, very unclear how this is going to be resolved. Again, unlike those people you've mentioned, Ritter and the rest of that gang, I'm not sure that this operation in Kursk is going to be coming to an end anytime soon. I don't think it's going to be pushed out in the next few days. I think they're going to dig themselves in, and they might they might still enjoy supplies coming in through Sumy. Well, we'll have to see about that. But it's going to be I think a big operation to get them out. Now, the one thing you also have to think is that Ukrainians are using a certain amount of imagination when they launch these operations, and you have to say, well, when are the Russians going to use some imagination? I mean, where the only thing we've seen from Russia now since their withdrawal from Kiev, which happened in April 2022, which again is now almost 2.5 years, they've just been grinding in the Donbass. which is just going to go on. I mean, this is not coming to a conclusion anytime soon. Ukrainians are like the Russians. You know, they're going to fight. They're going to fight this grinding war. They're not just going to run away. It's fantasy that they're going to run away. There's been no collapse in morale. There's been no collapse in lack of ammunition, lack of armory. No collapse even in manpower. So you think, well, maybe, just maybe, a kind of a different approach from Russia might actually yield some result. An offensive somewhere else, which would catch Ukraine by surprise, in the way that I think Ukraine has caught Russia by surprise. So it's very interesting that these people, again, the Ritter and the rest of them, remember they were telling us at the beginning how well Russia was doing, and again, their expertise was respected. It's okay, well, McGregor, well, Russia's doing really well, brilliant maneuvers. Russia has changed the rules of war. The rules of war was, hey, if you mount an offensive, you need 3-to-1 manpower superiority over the defense in order to succeed. But here Russia has fewer men in action than defenders. How does that work? How is that supposed to lead to a successful conclusion? Russia's reinvented this. That all this is just old-fashioned thinking. Well, obviously, Russia didn't reinvent the rules of war, and so Ritter and the rest of them then changed their story and said, yeah, well, when we said that Russia was doing really well in those first few months, well, we didn't quite mean that. In fact, Russia didn't do very well in those first few months, but it's doing really well now. It's really doing well now. Now it's learned from its mistakes, and now it's really doing well. So it's going, okay. Now, he'd say, well, okay. Why will the top brass in the Russian armed forces, why they will be now accused of corruption? I mean, these geniuses who've been running the military operation, they're all basically accused of graft. And Shoigu, the architect of the special military operation, and he's been kicked out. I mean, if you're doing so well, why have they been kicked out? And now we have this intelligence failure. How do you have an intelligence failure of this magnitude? I don't get this. I posted earlier today a report from May 2023. This was the leaks, the Discord leaks that were published in the Washington Post in May 2023, where it said quite explicitly that Zelensky was planning to attack Russia, and not just by missiles on Russian territory. He was actually planning to launch an invasion into Russia. So it's in the Washington Post, May 2023. Then you would think that Russian intelligence, especially military intelligence, would be very well aware of that possibility. But apparently not. So now I guess the Ritter and Martyanov and others are going to be celebrating in the next few days about how this Kursk offensive is heading towards disaster for Ukrainians. It's Ukraine's last throw of the dice, the Battle of the Bulge. And then once they're crushed like beetles, once Russia has wiped the floor with them, once Russia has made mincemeat of them, then victory will be ours. I don't know, when you have intelligence failures of this magnitude, I just don't think your next task is victory. Yeah, I know we completely cocked this up, and we had no idea what the hell we're doing. But hey, thank you. We're collecting the prize. We won. We've defeated the enemy. It just doesn't really work that way. So I'm kind of very skeptical of this. But I think what they do, and particularly in the case of Ritter, is that they do their social media thing here. They do their Twitter Spaces. They write for RT, and then this is relayed back into Russia as Western experts say. Western experts say Ukraine is doing really badly. And I think that maybe that reassures Russians. Oh, thank God, Western experts are saying, how Russia's on the brink of victory. So on the RT site today, I was going to post it, but then I thought, oh, this is really so boring and so depressing. Is yet another article based on information from the SVR, which is Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, that, I'm going to say it again, the United States is getting sick to death of Zelensky and is about to throw him over or throw him under the bus, push him aside, and replace him with someone else. Yet another article. I don't know how many of these articles RT has run about how the Americans are about to push aside Zelensky. No evidence is ever presented. I mean, if you look at any at the in the Western media, the Americans are very happy. They're delighted by this turn of events in Kursk. They think that they've got a good investment. They've always thought Zelensky was a very good investment. And he's a very good investment. I mean, can you imagine a dreadful leader like Zelensky leading his country to disaster? And for the Americans, or the British and the Americans, he's killing Russians. As Lindsey Graham says, he's killing Russians for us. And he's doing it knowing that, the Russians are killing Ukrainians. I mean, how can you have a better leader than that as far as the Americans are concerned? He's killing Russians for us. And we don't even have to do anything. We just give him the arms. We're not, we can stay out. No Americans are getting killed, and he's killing Russians for us. Why would they want to push him aside? And they wouldn't. And there's no evidence is ever so you ask, well, where's your evidence? Where is SVR getting its evidence from? Well, I will hazard a guess. Just a random guess. They're getting it from Scott Ritter. They read these posts by Ritter. They go to those Scott Ritter Twitter Spaces, and Ritter is telling them, oh yeah, they're going to push aside Zelensky. They're sick of Zelensky. They're going to do a DM on Zelensky. Oh, SVR. Oh, they're going to. That's how it goes. Because otherwise, there's simply no evidence for it, because Zelensky is, the goose that keeps laying the golden eggs. He's doing exactly what the Americans want from him. Why he's doing it, I don't know. Why the Ukrainians are allowing themselves to be slaughtered in this way, in this insane war, I don't know. It's an absolute catastrophe. It's a catastrophe for the Russians and the Ukrainians, for the Slavic people. But it's a godsend for the Americans. Well, look, all these Slavs, they're killing each other. We don't have to do anything. They're just killing each other. And this could go on for several years. God. Anyway, so you talking to me, thank you, says, is the SMO going to plan? And I wouldn't have thought so. We have been told by the, quote, expert, unquote, for some 2.5 years now that the war is over. Yep, it's over. It's over. I mean, I bet if I looked on Twitter today and put in quotes, "It's over," I would find an awful lot of tweets from these usual crowd saying that it's over. Apparently, Ukraine has now been defeated in Kursk. It's over. The war's over. That's it. So, is the Ukrainian incursion into Russia no more than a desperate act in the face of defeat, or is there something else going on? So, I think I've just answered that. But you're absolutely right that this has been the meme for 2.5 years, which is it's over. I mean, remember, we were actually told in the first few days that Ukraine has already been defeated. Ukraine's air power has been defeated, crushed. Ukraine's air defenses are non-existent, obliterated. And Ukraine has been on its last legs from the beginning. But when you ask, is the SMO going to plan, then it's a very simple way of answering that. What were Russia's objectives in February 2022 when Putin launched the SMO? How far are we from achieving those objectives? Again, I supported Russia. I thought that the idea of trying to, stop NATO expansion into Ukraine was a good one. I wasn't sure that a military operation would succeed, but I was willing to, let's see what happens. But because it didn't succeed, it was always, it was always a very dubious way of going about it. I mean, because wars are very, very tricky things. I mean, a lot of states throughout history have tried to pull off great political victories by short, sharp campaigns that will achieve their objectives, and then that's it. We did it. It's over. Now we can move on and enjoy our political victory. It never really works out that way, and I kind of thought that this was unlikely to work out. So if you look at what were the SMO's objectives, which is neutrality for Ukraine, liberation for Donetsk and Lugansk, denazification, demilitarization, I think we're a long way from achieving that. But as you say, it's over. It's over. So anyway, Danaki, I think Danaki has his own response to that. Yes, it's going according to plan, only it's not the bullshit demilitarization, denazification plan they sold you on TV. Also, it's not an SMO, it's an SNO, special needs operation. Well, I think that's right. And I think it should have been obvious. And in September 2022, when, again, the Russians were caught completely by surprise by Ukraine's counteroffensive when they seized the territory around Kharkov and Kherson and so on, Izium, that the paradigm of a special military operation, of basically trying to win this war through a special military operation, was unlikely to succeed. Ukraine was simply too strong. Ukraine is just too big a country. And once Ukraine mobilizes, then you're not going to win this war by a special military operation. I mean, it's just not going to be enough. Ukraine has been turned into a lean, mean fighting machine, and a nasty one, no question. It's a very nasty state. NATO's involvement in Ukraine has been very malevolent. They clearly did in Ukraine what Russia has accused NATO of doing, which is to turn Ukraine into an anti-Russia, a very nasty, horrible little state that is driven by hatred towards Russia and driven by aggressive desires against Russia. Unfortunately, the SMO has only helped to reach that objective. I mean, now, Ukraine is just that. And so you're not going to win this war by a special military operation. You're not going to win this by a counterterrorism operation. I mean, this is a big country, huge amount of territory. I mean, a very large population. A special military operation is not going to do the job. You need to mobilize seriously. Got to take this war seriously. Now, maybe Russia can't do it. Maybe I don't know. We don't know exactly what goes on in the the portals of the Kremlin when they're having their discussions. For some reason, Putin has been reluctant to order a full mobilization. What those reasons are, I don't know. I mean, obviously, they're afraid of the public's response. The public would really get quite upset. But that could happen anyway. I mean, and I've said this, I think, for some time here at the Gaggle, which is there's going to come a point that the Russian public will get fed up. Any public is going to get fed up and say, we just don't want to lose our young men anymore for a war that's never going to end, a war that's never going to achieve its objectives. So that all of that could happen. But yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a special needs operation. And I should say again, the gas continues to flow to Europe. That's very, very nice, awfully nice of the Russians to continue to supply gas to Europe, to the Europe that apparently Russia is in an existential struggle with. Danaki says, a reply I got on Rurik's Substack. Escobar told Napolitano exactly that. The Russian Ministry of Defense does not consist of crooks and clowns, but it would seem of all seeing superior intellects, just as Martyanov insists. No, that's it. They're all seeing, but they're continually getting caught by surprise. And apparently there was also a lot of graft, and this is according to the Russian government itself. I mean, they're arresting the top brass within the Ministry of Defense for graft. And it's very interesting. I mean, this is what Prigozhin said. You remember Prigozhin? He was getting really fed up with this, but that's what he was accusing Shoigu and the rest of them. He said they were just graft. They were just stealing like mad from the Russian military. They don't have the equipment because these people have just been selling the stuff off and lining their pockets. So that all of that may be figuring in the calculations of the Russian leaders. We don't, for all the talk about all the equipment and the manpower and so on, we just don't know whether they exist or whether they're just figures on a piece of paper. Anyway, I mean there was an interesting article on RT today by one of these analysts who, although generally optimistic, kind of blurted out at some point that Russia may not have the manpower available to start a second front, because that which is what's needed here to start a second front in Kursk. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Where is this vaunted manpower? We'll see. Anyway, Cynthia, always very good to see you. Thank you so much, as always, Cynthia, for your generosity. It's always very nice of you. Anyway, Cynthia is talking about yesterday's film, this film we screened yesterday about Falling Down, which is a good film. I however, found it somewhat depressing. So again, well-made film, but very, very sad and I think kind of hopeless. But anyway, Cynthia says the only thing that is not at all believable about last night's film is the bit about Foster being fired from a defense company. The defense industry as a whole is so awash in cash that it can easily afford to keep so-called economically unviable types on the payroll, and the purse strings in DC also make sure of that. Then again, 1993 was shortly after the Cold War ended. At least it did so for a while. So major cuts in defense may indeed have been made at the time. You're absolutely right, Cynthia. And what's important is when this film was made. This was made in 1993, and the U.S. government did indeed start cutting back on military expenditures, because suddenly, well, the Cold War is over. What the hell do we need this massive military? And there was, for a short time, definitely a downturn in the U.S. Economy as a result of that. So if you go back to that time, 1990, 1991, that was the time, 1992, that was the time of a depression. I mean, it wasn't the Great Depression, but it was a severe depression that came about because of the cuts in military expenditures. It sank the elder Bush's presidency because America was going through a recession. And the recession was brought about by the cuts in military expenditures. So I think that is credible. But now, of course, it wouldn't be credible because there's money, lavish funds are being thrown at the military. What I thought was not credible is that they made him to be a much worse person than he really was. I mean, they kind of made him to be a psycho. And so I think it was maybe a little bit unfair on him, because I think he, obviously he was going through a deep depression over losing his job. I mean, his marriage has obviously failed. He doesn't get to see his child. So, it's very hard for him to cope. But I think that they went over the top by making him into a psycho. They deliberately exaggerated, that thing about him. So really, otherwise we might think, well, hey, this is an everyman. This could be anyone. Any one of us could just simply go over the edge. When you lose your job, you don't have any money, your marriage is broken down, you don't get to see your kids, you're completely alone in this horrible city of LA, which doesn't have any kind of any just no community, whatever. And so people say, "Yo, well, that's really awful." And then that would be the plight of every man. But then I think it decided, and I think it took a cowardly turn of making him into a psycho, and presented him as someone who was seriously mentally unbalanced. His wife was terrified of him, the child was terrified of him, and so on. So I think that they cheated a little bit to make the film more palatable, because if it was just simply every man who basically is whose just life is just is on the brink of despair, people really wouldn't like it at all. So I think that they decided to make it, oh, it's yet another psycho, and that's very much a kind of a Hollywood genre, where somebody is just a psycho. He preys on nice ordinary people just trying to have lunch or whatever. Oh, he's a psycho. There was a film like that, also made in LA in the aftermath of the Rodney King riots. I can't remember the title. It had Ray Liotta and Kurt Russell in it. And again, Psycho. It's just. But so it's a bit of a cop out, I think. But nonetheless, it's a good film, and I thought that Douglas was really good in that part. But as I say, I just found it's just too sad, really, when something like that happens. It's but anyway. Anyway, Marty, always good to see you. Thank you very much for your generosity, Marty. And then Cynthia goes on, I recall you saying that diamonds would make a great theme for a movie night. Oh, that's interesting. I don't remember saying that, but I'm glad I did. At the time, I thought you momentarily lost your mind. Maybe I did. Since only chick flicks popped into my head when thinking about diamonds. I, gentlemen, prefer blondes. But if you add heist to the theme title, I can see why diamonds would make such a great movie theme. And if not diamonds, you could extend it to include gold, jewels, perhaps money as well. Well, that's interesting. But oddly enough, I was thinking about a suggestion that you made a little while ago, Cynthia, about having the theme of corruption. Whether it's economic, financial, political corruption. Just have a poll, pick 5 movies about the worst kind of corruption. I mean, I'm thinking right now of Chinatown. That would be good. But there's another one that I'm thinking of. It'll come to me, the title. It's with Brian Donlevy and the actor who was in The Postman Always Rings Twice. He was in that film, but I can see his face, but name escapes me. So, but he was in this. So it's Brian Donlevy and this actor. That was again really about corruption. The Big Heat is another one about big time corruption. So I mean, you could probably pick a good few movies on the theme of corruption. So I think that was a good idea. I think I'll work on that. Pick a few movies on the theme of corruption. But suggestions are very welcome. Please, anyone, if you've got ideas about a film featuring corruption, any kind of corruption, political corruption, economic, financial corruption, the sleaze bags who get to the top by being deeply corrupt. As for the diamonds, let me just think about the issue of diamonds and jewels. I like that. I just see Marty has posted Frank Sinatra's "Strangers in the Night." He's always good. Not sure why, but that's always good. And then Cynthia says, and as far as diamonds, gold, jewels, or money heist movies go, I can only suggest a few, all of which are pretty old. Well, that's all right. As you may already, I mean, I'm always, anyway, here's some Odd Man Out, 1947. Have I seen that? I don't know. Cross. I mean, is it cross or crisscross? Maybe you're thinking of Crisscross. Crisscross is a famous kind of film noir. I think it was made around that time, 1949. Good movie. Good movie. The Asphalt Jungle. That's a great movie. The Killing. Yeah, that also a good movie. Odds Against Tomorrow. Have I seen that? And The Sting. Okay, those are great suggestions. Those are fantastic suggestions. Yeah, but I think it's Odd Man Out. I'm trying to think. It's such a ubiquitous title, so I don't know whether I've seen Odd Man Out or not. I'm gonna look it up on IMDb later to see it. Anyway, DJ 53144. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. He says, "Gaggle now, a flock of geese when not in flight." Yes, it is. A group, aggregation, or cluster lacking organization. Yeah, I guess I'd be lucky, but that's good. We don't want, we don't want organization. We don't want everyone to be to be saying the same thing and to be organized and repeating what everyone else is saying. So we encourage disagreement, and so that's all fine. And then an indefinite number participated in the gaggle of petty crimes. Yes, a secret society dedicated to identifying and combating putrid conspiracy narrative. All right. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I mean, these are all good. Just see, Mary says corruption, corporate, medical, social science, and financial would be good. Absolutely. Any kind of. Robert says the Great McGinty. Is that about corruption? I thought the Great McGinty, and maybe I'm getting it wrong. It's that Preston Sturges. I thought it was kind of about the creation of a phony kind of hero who wasn't really a hero. I wasn't sure that it was actually corruption. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought it was just creating a fake a hero. Preston Sturges has never been a particular favorite of mine. The only one of his movies that I quite liked was the one about the filming. Now it escapes me, with Joel McCrea and Veronica Lake. It's the filmmaker who wants to make the great American movie, and then he wants to make the great American movie about the terrible lives of people in the Great Depression, and then he decides to live the life of a person in the Great Depression. Of course, he gets himself into trouble. I think that was the best of his movies, but the title of it just escapes. So I'm sure Cynthia will remember it. It's Joel McCrea and Veronica Lake, the filmmaker. Anyway, let me go back to So. There we go. All right, load more. I got. Let me go. I'll second that. There we are. Okay. All right. Now we go. Yeah. Gaggle, the gaggle of geese. Marty has presented a picture of the gaggle of geese. Yeah. Every time I look at them, I mean, I kind of think of them as food. They don't look that impressive. I mean, I just think of them as something that's very tasty. You just see them roasted on a dish with potatoes and vegetables and fruit around it. I don't know. As animals, as birds, they just don't impress me that much. But when you look at them, they look really plump and juicy. I just see food there. I mean, that's my own failing, but but gaggle of geese. David Rogers says, "Good evening, George. Slightly surprising to hear you talk about autumn already. I was in Budapest only 2 weeks ago, and it was high summer with 34 centigrade." Well, you see, the thing is that for me, the start of autumn is the ever shortening days. That's the key ingredient for me. The weather doesn't matter to me so much. The shortening days are what matter. And so I can go out, and yeah, you're right. It's very, very warm, but that's not important to me. What is important is that, wow, look at how early it got dark, and then that's autumn. So it's the same with winter. The thing that I have problem with in winter isn't the cold. It doesn't even get that cold in Budapest. But it's the brutally short days. That's the killer for me, anyway. So when people say, "Oh, I love winter. I love Christmas," oh, God, yeah, it's awful. Um, anyway, Marty says, I like number 4 of the definition of the gaggle: a secret society dedicated to identifying and combating putrid conspiracy narratives. I like that as well, because it's conspiracy narratives. So it's not necessarily theories, or there's something wrong with that. It's conspiracy narratives. I think that's really good. Yeah. We're dedicated. We do try to identify conspiracy narratives. David Rogers says, candidate Harris is acting out a bit like Peter Sellers' character in the film Being There. Yeah, I accept that. I think the character of Sellers in Being There, I think he genuinely had people fooled. I think people really did think that those platitudes that he was coming out with were pearls of wisdom. With Harris, I think there's something a little more sinister going on, because I think the media know perfectly well that Harris is a total zero. I mean, they were writing these stories, 3-4 weeks ago. They were telling us that Harris is nothing, that she's useless, that she's a joke. She has no idea. She can't even utter a coherent sentence. She's makes a hash of every interview she takes part in. She's repugnant. People don't like her. The media were all over with stories like that. Now they're telling us that she's this exciting candidate, and they have that Time magazine cover. So you know that they are lying. They are absolute lying. It's an advertising campaign. As I was saying about this Ogilvy and Mather, they said, hey, well, how do we sell this to the public? Well, we sell it, first of all, by keeping her locked up and have nothing but adoring crowds and a constant bubble of adulatory stories about her, and all these kinds of pictures showing her to be beautiful and glamorous. It's a sinister operation. It's done by people who know that it is a lie. And that's really what the media do. They pretend to believe all sorts of things that they know are untrue. They know they're untrue, but they pretend. I mean, they knew perfectly well Trump had no relation with Russia. They knew this. Yet they continued to write those stupid stories, collect Pulitzer Prizes, even though they knew that this was total nonsense. So, it's like, when they say, oh, Trump said fascists are good people, they know this is a lie. It's the easiest thing in the world. You do a Google search and they'll tell you exactly what Trump said. So this is a more sinister operation than Sellers in Being There. I think that was much more innocuous. I think the Harris operation is definitely not innocuous. Anyway, Mary Grossman, thank you very much. Thank you for your generosity. Mary says, I saw a car with a cursive written Kamala sticker in my apartment building on the house. I had to sell the owners. I had to sell the owners flew a Ukrainian flag, Minnesota and its true self. I'm really very sorry. I mean, I don't know how long you've lived in Minnesota. I mean, maybe Minnesota is really your home, but it's kind of very dismal. I mean, you've got this awful governor, dreadful person, and then you've got this awful senator, Amy Klobuchar, and then you've got that creepy guy, the mayor of Minneapolis. I don't know if he's still mayor. I mean, I remember him from 2020. Kind of a strange-looking guy to be a mayor. So it's sort of sad. I mean, I always thought of Minnesota as this. Well, obviously the people there are very hardy, sturdy, very strong people, and basically Swedes, big, good-looking, blonde Swedes. It doesn't look like that's what they're made of today, so it's kind of pretty sad. Anyway, Marty posts Keir Starmer. Let me click on this. So let me read. It says, UK police commissioner threatens to extradite jail US citizens over online posts. We'll come after you. That's it. That's the UK. That's Starmer. But again, it goes back to what I was saying very earlier, which is that they're very selective who they're going to go after. They're going to go after, anyone who is posting online that is helping white nationalists. White nationalists are reading their tweets or, Facebook posting. Yeah, we're going to come after you. You're going to get a knock on the door. You're going to knock on your door. And we're going to haul you into prison. And you can expect swift justice. That's what the police was saying. Now, it doesn't mean, you've got, some Hindu Muslim riots that I was talking about earlier, which we had in 2022. Those people are not going to get a knock on the door. They're not going to get extradited from the United States. So it's very, very selective. That's the concept of anarcho-tyranny, where, the state comes after you with ruthlessness. If you're, a member of a disapproved of group, boy, they're going to come after you, boy, and it's fast, and they're going to dog on you. They're going to, knock on your door, and you go straight to prison. It's the absolute ruthlessness of a state. I mean, it's actually, worse than the Stalin era, because the way it worked under Stalin was there would first be you would first get a visit from the looks like a wasp. Hate those things. Yeah, you would first get a visit from the secret police. They would arrive, they would look through your things, and then they would leave. Then they would come back 2 weeks later. This time, they would arrest you. And then when you get arrested, you get taken to the Lubyanka, and then you would be interrogated. And then there would be swift justice administered. So it's actually, it took a little bit longer under Stalin. This is at the height of Stalin. And I'm not even talking about, Brezhnev era, but at the height of Stalin, that was the pattern. You'd first get a knock on the door from the KGB. They would come, they would look through your books and your papers, and then they would leave. Then they'd come back 2 weeks later, and then they would arrest you. So at least you had the 2-week respite. You knew they were coming back. And so that was but with the Starmer gang, and this horrible police chief here, this head of the Metropolitan Police, this disgusting creature, who says lip-smackingly about you're going to get a knock on the door. He's very selective who gets a knock on the door. Anybody else, hey, they're throwing their hands up in the air and say, well, there's nothing we can do. I mean, it's not up to us. It's out of our hands. It's the community leaders. We just can't do it. It's like, we can't do anything about the illegal migrants. We just can't stop the boats arriving. Sorry. We can send grannies to prison, but we just can't stop the boats arriving. Sorry. Just can't do it. So yeah, I mean, I think they would try, getting you people here in the U.S. Anyway, Marty then suggests. Marty says the lives of others. Yeah, the lives of others on the East German thing that would certainly be good to feature. But as I said, we have problems with the subtitles. Whenever I upload foreign films, we lose the subtitles, which is annoying. But Marty suggests a surveillance movie night. Actually, let me write that down. That's a really good idea. So I don't forget that. Surveillance movie night. Yeah, I like that a lot. That's very yeah. I think we should do that next because it's apropos of Starmer. So anyway, Marty, I mean, if you have any other suggestions, I mean, one thing that I would put a surveillance movie is The Conversation. I don't know if people remember that movie from the 1970s. It was made by Coppola. Um, he made it just after he did The Godfather. It has again Robert Duvall, Gene Hackman. Very very uncharacteristic part by Hackman. He's very very low key and subdued. But that's a film about surveillance. That I think The Conversation. But any other suggestions for films on surveillance? Yeah, please post them. But I think that's an excellent idea. I think we're going to do that next. Yeah, Marty puts The Conversation. I didn't even. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't even have to post it. Yeah, The Conversation, exactly. Good film. Very good. Very good. Very good film. And again, Robert, thank you so much. Robert, appreciate your generosity. Robert says NATO was created in 1949 to, quote, defend, unquote, Western Europe from the threat of the USSR, was set to pose to the freedom of the individual, the free society, to free speech, to free markets, and so on. The USSR is now long gone, yet the threat to free speech and the freedom of the individual and free society remains, only this time coming from Europe itself. No, that's absolutely correct. And I want to show, I mean, let's see if I can do this. I want to just read out a little bit from, apropos of what you just said, read out from this creep, this real creep, Thierry Breton, this letter that he sent to Elon Musk. He sent it yesterday, apropos of Musk's, let's see if I can get this. Apropos of Musk's interview of Trump. So he sent this warning, very, very sinister warning. Let's see if I can do it. Now. Nothing much is happening. Maybe in that minute. So that's it. So this is Breton. The lettering is a little small because he posted this letter on Twitter, which made it almost impossible to read. But he says, "Dear Mr. Musk, I am writing to you in the context of recent events in the United Kingdom and in relation to the planned broadcast on your platform X of a live conversation between a US presidential candidate and yourself." A US presidential candidate. He doesn't even, he says, has too much disdain even to mention who is this, a US presidential candidate. And again, you're wondering, what has this got to do with Thierry Breton, who is an EU commissioner, a US presidential candidate, and yourself, which will also be accessible to users in the EU. And then he goes, and I understand that you are currently doing a stress test on the platform. In this context, I am compelled to remind you of the due diligence obligations set out in the Digital Services Act. In other words, they've presented this law, and they're now saying to somebody who's not a citizen of any EU country, he has to understand about the Digital Services Act. And then it says, as the individual entity ultimately controlling a platform with over 300 million users worldwide, of which 1/3 is in the EU, that has been designated a very large online platform, you have a legal obligation to ensure excess compliance with EU law, and in particular the Digital Services Act in the EU. You have a legal obligation to ensure excess compliance with EU law. So what does this mean? What law? What compliance? This notably means ensuring, on one hand, that freedom of expression and of information, including media freedom and pluralism. So I love this, media freedom and pluralism. You know right away when somebody says that this is nothing to do with media freedom. This is about how do we crush media freedom? How do we make sure that there's no pluralism, no plural ideas expressed, are effectively protected. Oh yeah, what you really care about is protecting media freedom. And how are you protecting media freedom? By censorship. That's it. This is the sort of black is white, night is day, war is peace, ignorance is strength, and slavery is freedom. This is the logic of the EU. What we want to do is protect media freedom by cracking down on media freedom. So we have to, we ensuring media freedom are effectively protected, and on the other hand, that all proportionate and effective mitigation measures are put in place regarding the amplification of harmful content. Imagine that, harmful content. Thierry Breton, gets to decide what is harmful content in connection with relevant events, including live streaming, which is what he was doing with Trump, which, if unaddressed, might increase the risk profile of X and generate detrimental effects on civic discourse and public security. So he's telling Musk that this interview that you're going to have with Trump might have detrimental effects on civic discourse in Europe. This is an American presidential candidate. This is an interview taking place in America. And Breton, this little shit who is an EU commissioner, is saying, well, it might have detrimental effects on civic discourse and public security. This is important against the background of recent examples of public unrest brought about by the amplification of content that promotes hatred, disorder, incitement to violence, or certain instances of disinformation. So all of these things are now fair game for censorship. Hatred, disorder, incitement to violence, or certain instances of disinformation. So, we pretty much can censor what we like. It also implies informing EU judicial and administrative authorities without undue delay on the measures taken to address their orders against content considered illegal against national or EU law. Content considered illegal. So he's already telling us that pretty much all these views that he doesn't like are content considered illegal. So an interview with Trump could be content considered illegal. Taking timely, diligent, non-arbitrary, and objective action upon receipt of notices by users considering certain content illegal and informing users concerning the measures taken upon receipt of the relevant notice, and publicly reporting about content moderation measures. So, I don't want to go on. It's just too dismal. You're absolutely right that this is where we are. This is where we have reached in Europe. The whole idea that we have any respect for freedom of speech, freedom of media, any freedom of individual, that we don't have it, because anything at all can be deemed to have detrimental effects. And of course, remember the whole point of free speech is that it's speech that could well have detrimental effects. That is unpopular speech. That's the point. Popular speech doesn't need protection. Banalities and platitudes and trivia, they don't need protection. It's precisely contentious and controversial issues that may cause distress among some people. That's the speech that needs protection. And that's precisely what the EU and the UK are determined to stamp out. And Harris is also determined to stamp out if the courts let her. I mean, in EU and Britain, you can do all of that. But in the US, it's a little harder. But absolutely, this is where it's happening. And so the whole idea that the West is a kind of a safe haven for freedom is absolute joke. It's so yeah. I mean, everything that Thierry Breton said goes against the spirit of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and so therefore this is what they have in mind. You just crush free speech altogether. And I'd say that the chances of success are pretty good. I mean, unless people resist, then it will succeed. I mean, it's you have to resist. If you don't, they're gonna. And I mean, I don't mean resist with violence, because if you use violence, then it's the easiest thing in the world to get crushed. Boom, that's it. That's what they want you to do. They're provoking you to use violence because then they can send you to prison and no one's going to give a damn about you. But that, and they're not going after people. Not that many people use violence, and the violence wasn't particularly serious. They're going after the media influencers, the social media influencers, and they know this. That's what Breton is. I mean, in the case of Breton, he wants to go after Trump, which is what Harris wanted to go after with her. Hey, you got to kick him off Twitter, which Twitter did. Twitter did once Biden and Harris took power after the election. They did indeed kick Trump off, as did Facebook, exactly as Harris wanted. Anyway, Mary says, you're talking about the Christmas goose, too greasy, and turkey too dry. Homegrown dark meat is yum. I agree with you. My favorite is also duck. I think a duck is actually. I find duck much tastier than goose. I don't mind greasiness. I like fat, fat on my meat. So that's me. So I don't have a problem. But I think duck is much tastier than goose. I think it has a much stronger taste, whereas I think goose is just, I don't know, doesn't have that much of a taste. Turkey, I think, is a bore. I've never liked turkey. What is homegrown? I'd like to know where'd you get homegrown duck? Because I like the sound of it. I mean, I just buy duck, but I'd like to know where's the homegrown. Do you grow duck? So anyway, Mary says, thank you very much for the doggies. Yeah, they'll appreciate it, but with them it's always something else is going on, because they just go straight for my throat and say, what the hell do you do here? Why can't you bring us more? We're hungry, and we need more. So I appreciate it. So thank you very much, Mary. But those hounds, they're just always ungrateful. Anyway, Dan Rock says, I'll be shocked but not surprised if Obama in drag wins. I think that's well put. Yeah, I agree with that. I'll be shocked but not surprised. But again, it's very interesting, because if she does win, you'll know that this is a scam, because there's nothing at all that she's offering that has anything to do with the lives of Americans. I mean, she comes along and makes a speech and says, climate change is the existential crisis of our time. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, is there anyone in America who's sitting there thinking, oh, yeah, I agree? I mean, there are obviously people who think, yeah, existential crisis, climate change. It's a tiny minority. Most people aren't thinking, well, what am I going to do about climate change? I mean, they're basically trying to get through their days, trying to make a living. But that's the thing, climate. Oh, comprehensive immigration reform. She talks about comprehensive immigration reform. Everybody knows what comprehensive immigration reform means. It means mass amnesty. Mass amnesty to all illegals living in the United States. All illegals who have arrived in the United States since 1986, since when the last immigration amnesty legislation was passed under Ronald Reagan. So that means 40 years. 40 years of illegal migrants and their dependents coming in to the United States. All of this, when they say comprehensive immigration reform, all of them are to be amnestied, legalized, and they'll be able to vote. That's the program. So again, if you get her into power, that's what you're going to get. So you think, if she's President Harris, is that what the people wanted? Is that what you wanted? Plus, war in Russia and everything. So is this what you wanted, or your anti-fossil fuel nonsense, comprehensive immigration reform, pointless wars, multiculturalism BS, boys and girls sports. I don't have to go through it. You know the list. And then she'll be president. You say, yeah. Apparently, that's what the American people vote for. Yeah, that's what we want. That's what we want our country to be. I don't think so. But again, I wouldn't come November. Very depressing time, for obvious reasons. I wouldn't be surprised if she is president. Lynn says, for such a sportsman, farmer, outdoorsy person such as yourself, short days must be a real problem for you. I detect a note of sarcasm, which is okay. But they are indeed depressing for me. And it's a very, very, it's dismal. You don't have to go out to notice that there's no sun outside. So anyway, then Dan Rock says, I forgot how good falling down was. Okay, I agree with that. I think I saw it some years ago, and I liked it a lot more this time than when I saw it. But I found it, I thought it was depressing then. I just found it to be even more depressing now. But it's a good film, and Douglas was really good, and I liked the movies Douglas was making in that era of his life. I thought that what was the God. I was going to mention his famous film with Sharon Stone. It slipped my mind, but that was a pretty good movie. Again, his part was a kind of an interesting part. But the film The Gift, I like the persona that he kind of created, somewhat sleazy, somewhat corrupt, basically decent, but he's always but somehow he's fallen by the wayside. He's never, he's going through hard times in pretty much in all of his films. Dan Rock says, wasn't Jesse Ventura governor of Minnesota? Yeah, he was. I like him. Yeah, I like him too. 20 years ago, I think it was more than 20 years ago. I mean, it's been a while since Jesse Ventura was governor. Enemy of the state. Have we had enemy of the state? But we could show it again. But I thought we maybe. But enemy of the state. Yeah, we could definitely have that. Let me write that down. Enemy of the state. It's a good suggestion. I'll write that down. Enemy of the state. Okay. Jesse Ventura. I don't want to die and not see a woman president. Wow. All right, Marty, you win. All right, that's good. That's very good. I mean, if you said that, yeah, forget that. Forget whatever. Forget whatever nice things I just said about him. It's inexcusable to say something like that. It's inexcusable. Whatever. You want to give women a fair break or whatever. But when you say, if you said that, I don't want to die and not see a woman president, then that's beneath contempt. That's beneath contempt. David Rogers says Starmer and Met Commissioner and fellow travelers are agents of the elite. Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. And that's Starmer. I noticed that Starmer came out today with some statement about warning Iran against attacking Israel. Now, this is a creep. His whole country is collapsing. His streets are unsafe. They're collapsing. His housing estates are collapsing. There's no order. People are deeply miserable. And he's worrying about goddamn Israel. I think just as he's worrying about Ukraine. And then Danaki says, apropos of Jesse Ventura, now he's gone full jab mandate pro Kamala. All right. I'd lost track of him, to be honest. I mean, I remember when he had a show on RT, and I wasn't that convinced by it. But you kind of like the idea. Same with Schwarzenegger. I don't think Schwarzenegger was anything special, but you kind of like the idea of an unusual person becoming governor of California, or a wrestler, a former professional wrestler becoming governor of Minnesota. But unfortunately, what happens is a lot of times when somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience, in fact, has zero experience, hasn't really thought about the issues particularly deeply, that person is easily captured by the elites. They're very, very good at getting that person, filling his head with nonsense, and soon the novelty of having a professional wrestler as governor wears off because he's mouthing the same platitudes as before, but he mouths them in a more acceptable way because he's got that whole wrestling persona, and so it makes it a lot better, a lot more appealing, because hey, this is a real tough guy. He's a real man's man. He's a wrestling pro. Same with Schwarzenegger. Hey, it's much better if you mouth this nonsense with somebody who's speaking with that Austrian accent and that whole former professional athlete and bodybuilder and big movie star persona. It's essentially the way the system works. You got to put someone forward to sell the same old shit. But it's somebody who's has a more appealing public persona. Dan Rock says, in the conversation, you get Frederick Forrest too, the Nazi store owner, from falling down. You're absolutely right. That's absolutely right. He's the, he's in that in the conversation. Yeah, absolutely. He's also in, and I think this was pointed out by Cynthia yesterday, he's also in another Coppola movie, which was Apocalypse Now. So but he's a good actor. Yeah. Anyway, DJ says Minnesota went downhill after the death of Paul Wellstone and the last episode of The Prairie Home Companion. Yeah, The Prairie Home Companion. That's wow. That takes us back. Yeah. And now people are going to remember things that I Yeah. So, yeah, pull from, yeah, and then and then and then Sinook says NARC starring Ray Liotta and Jason Patrick is a gritty, a man's got to do what a man's got to do crime noir set in the slums of Detroit, ethical versus unethical cop. Thought it was really well done. Yeah, that was, that is a good film, but that wasn't the one I was thinking of. I was thinking of Ray Liotta, Kurt Russell, which was made just in the aftermath of the LA riots. And Cynthia says, I'll second the conversation. And Crisscross. Yeah. So I thought it was Crisscross. Good. It's a good movie, Crisscross, by the way. It's like those were the film noirs. It had that guy who's only famous for making film noirs. The name escapes me, but I mean, he made so many of those film noirs. That's all he's famous for. And then Dan Rock says, I thought I hated EU so-called politicians or technocrats, but when I hear George describe him as this little shit with such a visceral hatred, I have to bow down to the winner. Thank you very much. Yes, this guy is a total utter asshole. I mean, I got to be careful with my language because we're on YouTube. But this is a true lowlife. You just look at his face, and he's got that whole prissy little French manner, somebody who likes good clothes, and I like to eat in good restaurants, and I've got a nice fashionable haircut. And he's telling everyone what to do. He's kind of like Bernard-Henri Lévy, always with the expensive clothes and the expensive haircut, and somebody who likes the good life and goes to the best Parisian restaurants. Awful scum. Anyway, Dan Rock, thank you so much. Thank you for the generosity. Dan Rock says, I hope I live long enough to see the downfall of the EU. I hope you do as well. I hope I do as well. It would be nice if it happened reasonably soon, but I don't know. But it would be absolutely lovely if we could just see it, because these people really deserve to be flushed down the toilet. Sinook says, love Iran's swift response, allowing all U.S. assets to get in place. Well, thank you so much, Sinook, for your generosity. And I kind of agree with you. I doubt whether we're going to get much of a response from Iran. At most, we might get a pro forma thing, the same kind of thing we had in April, but we may not even get that. And Iran might just simply say, well, we don't want to spoil the possibility of a peace deal between Israel and Hamas. If we launch an attack against Israel now, that will spoil the chances of an agreement. So we decided to hold off on an attack. The point is that, of course, Iran is in a very difficult place. It really is between a rock and a hard place. If it does nothing, it looks like a paper tiger, which of course it is. If it does do something, chances are Israel, the United States, Britain, France will collaborate and fight off any attack, just as they did in April. And then he presents Iran as they're the bad guy. Iran is an unprovoked aggression by Iran. Now, your point, Sinook, about Iran's swift response allowing all U.S. assets to get in place, you're absolutely right. I mean, once you delay, then nothing's going to happen, because now you've delayed, delayed. Now, all American and Western assets are in place. It's going to be very difficult to launch any kind of an attack. I had my doubts, to be honest, that Iran would do anything, because ultimately what Israel did was to kill a Hamas leader. Israel didn't really kill an Iranian leader. So the responses that we have had from Iran in the past, the, again, pro forma response over the killing of Soleimani, which was quite a big deal. He's a big figure in Iran, a national hero. So the Americans killed Soleimani, and Iran just did a pro forma attack on some barracks in Iraq. And then, of course, we had the attack on the Iranian consulate. So those were direct attacks at Iran. And even then, all you really got was a kind of a pro forma move from Iran. But in this case, although the attack was in Iranian territory, it was still a Hamas leader who was killed. So I don't think Iran's going to do anything, to be honest. I mean, I may be wrong, and tomorrow there's going to be an attack, but I get the feeling that they're not going to do anything about this. And their excuse will be, A, we were trying to ensure that there's a peace agreement signed between Israel and Hamas, and B, it wasn't an Iranian who was killed. So, I think that's going to be Iran's rationale. But look, I mean, there's no question of what, and I agree with Finkelstein here, which is what Israel is doing is provoking Iran. You know, it's just simply you keep needling and needling and needling Iran. So that, again, Iran's in a difficult position. I mean, if you don't do anything, then you seem to be weak and useless. If you do something, then you're the warmonger. And Finkelstein said that's always what Israel does. It's constantly needling its adversaries to do something, and then Israel can say, "Oh, we have to act in self-defense." It did that with Nasser, it did that with the PLO, and is doing that with Iran. And I think that's absolutely right. And Danaki says, if she does win, which I think is a distinct possibility, would that mean the end of Trumpism? Could somehow still revive it for 2028 and beyond? No, I think it is the end of Trumpism. I think that if you see the 2020 election, which I think was never on the level, but people could accept what happened because Trump made clear almost from the start that he was coming back. So from January, he leaves January the 20th, 2021, but he makes clear he's coming back, that he's going to make another attempt to win the presidency. And that meant that people could just relax and say, okay, well, he's coming back. We only have to wait another 2 years for the next presidential campaign to start, and Trump will be back. If he loses this time, Trump won't be back because he would be 82 in 2028, and he's not going to come back. That would be that. So at that point, what happens to his supporters? Now, either they can resort to violence, and I don't think they will, because the state is just too strong. It's too powerful. It's going to crush opposition much too easily. Or then they die down, and then say you just have to accept reality. You got Biden, you didn't want Biden, you got him. You got Harris, you didn't want Harris, you got him. There's no point. There's no point to resistance. And then you'll bow down, and you'll say, okay, can we please nominate someone that you will find acceptable, that you're not going to attack and destroy and humiliate, and maybe even accept him as a member of your club. And the state may say, all right, who do you have in mind? Well, what about someone like maybe Ron DeSantis? Or what about Brian Kemp? Brian Kemp, he's a governor of Georgia. He's part of the Davos gang. Maybe we can nominate Brian Kemp. Would you accept Brian Kemp? Yeah, all right. Nominate Brian Kemp, and maybe, we can have a Republican once again in the White House. Quote, Republican, unquote. Now, I think it'll be the end of Trumpism. and then we'll be back to the sort of McCain, Romney, and I think it'll be Brian Kemp who'll be the nominee. And the National Review crowd, they'll all rally around him. They'll tell us, "Oh yeah, great conservative." David Brooks in the New York Times, fantastic, absolutely perfect conservative. That's the man we wanted. He's the one we've been waiting for. So 2028, I predict Brian Kemp. Anyway, but to just put a bow on it, I think it will be the end of Trumpism, because then people will realize there's no point. There's no point in running Trump. We've now run Trump in election after election, and they're absolutely determined to prevent Trump or Trumpism from prevailing. So there's no point in running another Trumpian. He's not going to win. They're going to make sure he doesn't win. So we run J.D. Vance. They're going to do to J.D. Vance what they did to Trump. They're not going to allow him to win. So can we please run a Republican that you would deem acceptable? And I think they're going to go with Brian Kemp. Anyway, Mary Grossman says, sister-in-law on the farm in Sleepy Eye, Minnesota, raised the ducks and then wrung their necks. She was a very good cook. Huh. Really, I'm impressed by people who can do that. I wouldn't be able to do that. Just break the neck. I guess you have to be ruthless about this. But I admire anyone who does that. Just break their necks. Yeah. But I'm sure those were very tasty ducks. The Game, Marty says The Game. And then Dan Rock says, of course, the film I was trying to think of, the well-known film Basic Instinct, which I thought, leave aside all the obviously the sexual parts of it, but it was a good film, and I like the Douglas persona in that film. The Game, I like his persona in The Game, and then there was another one that he did, which where he played a corrupt cop who goes to Japan. Again, he's a corrupt cop on the take, but he's sort of on the side of good. I mean, you can't really make Douglas a wholly good person. He was a thief and pretty sleazy. But he goes to Japan and teams up with a Japanese cop. Black Rain, which again I thought was a pretty decent film. I mean, it's not the film that I usually like, but again I thought Douglas was good in that. Disclosure, yeah, that wasn't bad. I didn't like Disclosure that much. I don't know, maybe I just didn't like the politics of Disclosure, but yeah. But everybody knows Basic Instinct was the one I was thinking of. But just the name completely escaped me momentarily. Black Rain, everyone, Black Rain, and then DJ says, apropos of Iran, that's part of their response: make your enemies suffer economically until they have to withdraw their resources and let down their guard. The Zionists are bleeding the U.S. dry. Yeah, but it's a willing endeavor. I mean, I think Israel is humiliating America, but America's happy to be humiliated. America assumes all the risks, but doesn't get any benefits. Dan Rock says the conversation "enemy of the state" sounds like a Gene Hackman poll. No, I mean that's two of them with Hackman. I think we'll make sure that we'll keep the Hackman content down. But good point. And then Danaki says U.S. approves $20 billion Israel weapons package. Well, and why wouldn't they? Of course they would. Mary Grossman says, I don't think Russia responded to the beach bombing yet. I don't think so either. I mean, there's so many of these provocations, it's hard to keep track of them. But you're absolutely right, Mary. I don't think Russia has. Anna Marie, always very good to see you. Thank you so much, Anna Marie. Really appreciate your kindness. Thank you for joining. Always like to hear from Switzerland, because Switzerland gets ever more depressing. The news from Switzerland gets ever more depressing. So it's really good to have, somebody from Switzerland joining us. And then DJ says, I hope that they remember to buy a service contract that includes spare parts for somewhere other than the Netherlands. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's right. Anyway, I think my time has come to an end. Thank you, everybody who has joined me. Thank you for all of your comments, all of your criticisms, all of your suggestions. Sorry I didn't get to all of the comments on YouTube, but really appreciate everybody who joined me. Thank you so much. Thank you for those who have contributed to those two savages. It's so hard being around them. They're just so intolerant. We talk about tolerance, but they are the exemplars of intolerance. Kind of canine supremacy. And, we talk about white supremacy. They're canine supremacy, and it's very hard to put up with. But anyway, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We're going to be back on Thursday. Hope you'll be able to join me. Look forward to it. Thank you. All the best. Until Thursday. Bye-bye.